Hello, welcome to today's episode on chasing the dream of my shining a spotlight on an organization that I want to look at the culture of. And so, just torn from today's headlines, as of last Friday, a company by the name of Stellantis told 400 employees, white collar employees, today's a mandatory work from home day. So these employees were forced to work from home last Friday. And then they were also told by Stellantis, you need to attend a mandatory video conference call, which they did, only to be told at this video conference call, you're all being terminated. This is classic 20th century organizational behavior. And the minute I saw it, I had far too many Tourette's kind of flashback feelings about my 20 years spent in corporate America and the things that were done to me, which led me to go out on my own back in 2009. So I want to kind of walk through the scenario. And at the end, I'll give you my kind of synopsis of what I think this means. But it's a really fascinating way to kind of strip away all of the marketing and spin and PR that organizations typically use instead of just being honest and transparent. So Stellantis uses mandatory remote work day to cut 400 white collar jobs. It was a mass firing of everybody that was on the call. So taken straight from Yahoo Finance, let's kind of go right into this. So white collar workers at Chrysler auto manufacturer parent Stellantis have reason to be nervous. If they ever receive a company notice telling them that it's mandatory that they work remotely on a particular day, be afraid. Be very afraid. That's what happened to people at Stellantis last Thursday. They were informed by notice that the next day, last Friday, the car maker would be holding important operational meetings that require specific attention and participation. So they said, to ensure everyone can effectively participate, the notice continued, we have decided to implement a mandatory remote work day. Employees, it indicated, were expected to work from home unless otherwise instructed by your manager. The car dealership guy X account shared on his X account last Thursday. These workers who were scheduled and forced to attend a video conference in which they were notified you're out. They were salary, non-union employees in tech and engineering roles, strictly in the United States, because this Stellantis is a global car manufacturer. So the automaker Stellantis, which counts Jeep, Ram, Chrysler, and Dodge among its brands in its brand portfolio, said in a statement, listen to the language. Listen to this freaking language. As the auto industry continues to face unprecedented uncertainties and heightened competitive pressures around the world, Stellantis continues to make the appropriate for whom? Structural decisions across the enterprise to improve efficiency and optimize our cost structure. This is kind of such classic 20th century organization culture speak. The words are so neutered. They're so lacking in emotion. They're so cold. This is what I want to draw attention to. This is kind of what I've been railing against for the last 15 years in my consulting practice, when I teach organizations, when I coach organizations not to behave this way. One mechanical engineer let go last Friday, spoke about the process anonymously with WJBX Fox, a TV station out in Detroit, saying it was a mass firing of everybody that was on this video conference call. He suspected the real reason behind the layoffs involved a push to move jobs to low-cost countries, noting that Stellantis is outsourcing many jobs already across its global corporate footprint to India, Mexico, and Brazil. So Fortune reached out to the company over the weekend, but received no immediate reply outside of normal business hours. But speaking on last Thursday, the Wall Street Journal, which first reported these layoffs, the company said it would offer affected workers a comprehensive separation package and transition assistance. It added that the reductions would help it preserve critical skills that are needed to implement its production plans for electric vehicles. So obviously, the global totality of its kind of business strategy is a shift to a different kind of vehicle, electric vehicles. And so therefore, apparently, according to the organization's longer term strategic plan, by this shift in focus, there's a commensurate need to reduce or restructure its workforce, right? Okay. The company intends to spend over $50 billion through the end of the decade to electrify, woohoo, its lineup, despite a recent slowdown in electric vehicle sales growth and surging demand for hybrid vehicles. Well, that doesn't necessarily make much sense from a strategic plan. It plans to offer 8 new electric vehicle models in the US by the end of 2024, and more than 24 different EV electric vehicle types by 2030. So let's talk a little bit about etiquette layoff. So we know this. We know this in organizational behavior. We know this in kind of my world is in the same way you look at a society in terms of how it treats its young ones and the elderly. In organizational behavior, we know that an organization's true essence, its true culture, is pretty much reflected in the way it brings people in and it transitions them out. So, how to properly conduct a layoff and inform employees of them? It's often debated. I disagree fundamentally with that statement. It's not, it may be debated, but there's only one right way to do it, and this sure ain't it. So, I'm not going to kind of dive any deeper here, but I do want to give, the benefit of a little bit of perspective in terms of looking at different news sources. So let's go to Fox Business News. Dodge parent Stellantis laying off hundreds of U.S. workers. So Stellantis, the parent company, as I mentioned, of Dodge and Jeep and Chrysler, confirmed last Friday that it's laying off 400 more U.S. workers. 400 more U.S. workers. It'd be one thing if this story was contained just to what it did last Friday to these white-collar workers, but it's part of a global initiative at Stellantis to completely restructure its workforce. So it announced that it was laying off 400 more U.S. workers as it continues to trim its global workforce amid its transition to EV vehicles. Okay. That is their prerogative. And I want to kind of read this. Stellantis announcement. In its statement to the world about its rationale for doing this, it blamed California emissions regulations as a push to lay off these additional 400 employees. After rigorous organization, listen to the language. Just again, listen to the absolute lack of humanistic tendency here. After rigorous organizational review, Stellantis confirms that we will reduce our engineering, technology, and software organizations by about 2% globally. Here in the US, the company's statement read, these reductions will be effective on March 31st, so this upcoming end of week. Stellantis will offer support for those affected, including a comprehensive separation package and transition assistance. So what they're saying is, we had to do this. We're kind of giving these people a wonderful golden parachute as we push them out of the organization. And I'm always suspect of any organization's true intentions when they claim that they're doing something altruistic as they're literally pushing people out of the organization. Those don't kind of dovetail this kind of claim that they're being compassionate in their exit strategy and the force that they're laying off these 400 people in the first place. The company added in its statement, while we understand this is difficult news, these actions will better align resources while preserving the critical skills needed to protect our competitive advantage as we remain laser focused on implementing our electric vehicle product offensive and our Dare Forward 2030 strategic plan. Woohoo! I mean, think about the language. Please think about the language that's being utilized here, the complete abject lack of humanity. So I want to go over to Reuters and see what they have to say about it. Stellantis laying off about 400 U.S. workers, citing unprecedented uncertainty. So look, this is kind of just yet another corporate permutation of the same mantra, which is we don't know what the future holds. It's scary. It's chaotic. There's a lot of stuff happening outside. You know what we're going to do? We're going to lay off our employees. That is, as those of you who watch and listen to me and know me fairly well, I've been saying this for decades. This is the single dance move most organizations' senior brain trust have. When times get hard, their first knee-jerk visceral reaction, and it is awful in terms of what it does to your culture. Let's lay off employees. That's their first move. And it really should be not only not considered, to my subjective kind of thought process about organizational behavior, it should objectively be the last thing an organization does. Why? Because if you think about it, it's not only just the impact of the people who are pushed out, it's about the people who remain. And what's the messaging? What are you saying to them? They're all at risk. Everybody's at risk. We're letting these 400 additional white-collar US employees go. But guess what? If you're not laid off, and we've said everything we've had to say about the external challenges and electric vehicle and California emissions, what does that mean for my job security? Oh, wait, I have none. Okay. So according to Reuters, Chrysler parent Stellantis said last Friday, it's going to lay off these 400 employees. So the Italian-American automaker said it's reducing its engineering technology and software organization, these 400 jobs. It's going to be effective March 31st. It's about 2% of all jobs worldwide in its global Stellantis organization. So last year, Stellantis twice offered buyouts to groups of US workers, including giving 6,400 US salary employees a financial incentive to depart. Go, leave, get out. Look, we'll encourage you. They're sending a message to their workforce. The company said, again, there's PR and the organization's senior management decision on the language it uses to explain the strategies it's employing. The company said as the auto industry continues to face unprecedented uncertainties and heightened competitive pressures around the world, Stellantis continues to make the appropriate structural decisions. Again, I'll ask it again, appropriate from whose perspective? Structural decisions across the enterprise to improve efficiency and optimize our cost structure. You've heard me say this so many times, it's like really getting sick and tired of being a broken record here, but you got three choices in terms of how to drive your organization forward. You've got strategy. Strategy is incredibly variable based on what's happening externally to you in the marketplace, in the global economy. So strategy is whimsical. You've got operational efficiency. It's a very kind of cut and paste, very cold calculating. We got to squeeze more blood out of this stone. And then there's your people. And your people give you your only truly lasting competitive advantage to succeed. And what Stellantis, like many other organizations, are saying just by this set of activities is we fundamentally, listen to this, I mean, get this, we fundamentally do not care about our people. They're a consideration in a formula, in some kind of calculation. And this is what is going on in corporate America still in the 21st century. So earlier this month, United Auto Worker President Shawn Fain said Stellantis had terminated 2,000 temporary workers. Because, not only do employees not matter, on the bottom of the employee totem pole are temporary or contract workers. So he had said that Stellantis terminated 2,000 temp workers, criticizing the decision as about corporate greed. He noted that under the UAW contract reached with Stellantis last time around 3,000 temporary workers were converted to permanent. And you do that typically as a pure cost-cutting measure. It's not anything reflecting in terms of the company's altruistic tendency to retain top talent. No, it's strictly a monetary consideration. Stellantis cited preparations for the transition to electric vehicles. We've talked about that last year in offering buyouts after telling employees earlier that a review of the company's operations made it clear that we must become more efficient. Oh, thank you. You're becoming more efficient. And so I'm just seen as a line item on your financial statements. This is what organizations do time and time again. And this is why, check this out, employees do not have any loyalty. They don't have any expectations of there being any kind of loyalty from the employer perspective in the employer-employee contract when organizations act like Stellantis is doing. So let's take a look, as you know I love to do, and see what has been said about Stellantis historically in terms of from its employee perspective. And the way to do that, absent, as I've said, of speaking to employees who are there, is to go in and read online reviews. But I will state this, as you know, there is always a caveat that when you go online and you read employee reviews, it's going to be skewed a certain way. There's going to be inherent bias that we have to factor in, right? So when an employee like myself has an experience working in an organization, current or prior organization, I'm probably not going to go online if I'm basically satisfied, right? In terms of the normal distribution of employee satisfaction, if I'm kind of middle of the road, I'm not going to go online. What's going to drive me online is I have an amazing experience that I want to shout out, or have a really bad experience. And even when you think about it skewed those two ways, two ends, those two wingtips on the distribution curve, I'm more than likely to go online if I've had a negative experience. That's just human nature. So let's start out by going to Glassdoor. So that's typically a starting point. And when you look at the 6,000 employee reviews, and a scale of 1 is miserable, 5 is amazing, it's about a 3.7. Okay, Carlos Tavares, the CEO, has a 72% favorability rating. Okay. We want to just kind of drill down a little bit here. And when you look at it in the aggregate, when you look in terms of the kinds of categories of employee review, you see race, ethnicity of review. It seems to be that while no ethnic group or race of individuals rates it above a 4, there's an interesting kind of dichotomy going on where you see Asians, 82 reviews, give it an aggregate 3.9 employee review, Caucasians give it a 3.2 with 178 reviews. So this is kind of the granular detail we start to look at to kind of put our finger on the pulse, so to speak. And then when you look at the kind of reviews, there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of reviews that are negative, and the cons almost always come back to culture and how employees are treated, or how poorly they're treated, actually. So we can move on to Indeed. That's another stop on the culture tour where we look at certain websites to gauge what employees are saying. So when we look at Indeed, we look at its ratings. 1,532 employees have given responses to the well-being survey, and happiness is average. Not great, but in terms of what employees are saying about Stellantis, that's the top. Employees' happiness is average. Stress-free environment is below average. Sense of purpose, their individual sense of purpose working at Stellantis is below average. And their satisfaction with how people see the way things are going is below average. This is damning. This is damning when you look at just the sheer number of employees and the kind of feedback in terms of what they're saying about their sense of well-being there. Carlos Tavares, CEO, gets an 80% approval rating. Fascinating, very fascinating. We're talking about a $10 billion US annual revenue company with a global reach. So it's really kind of interesting. You look at locations, you look at salary types, and then you look at rating based on 9,300 reviews of employees at Stellantis, and you look at exploring reviews by category. And this is kind of, I was going a little bit deeper than I did up above when I did well-being at those three primary categories. So work-life balance is a 3.6, job security and advancement, 3.4, culture, 3.6, management, 3. This is just average at best. And if I'm a senior thought leader at Stellantis, and I'm thinking about globally or in the United States, if we really want to kind of drill down in terms of employee future initiatives, this is just so problematic on so many levels. And so the last piece of information I'll use to kind of aggregate the snapshot is another website that I like to go to called Ambition Box. So I want to kind of take a look here. And now granted, these are fewer reviews than the other review sites. There's only 277, and the aggregate satisfaction score on that 1 to 5 scale is a 3.4. But let's kind of dive into the categories, because I think that this is really kind of interesting. When we look at overall rating 3.4, and then we look at categories of employee ratings on surveys, job security 3.4, skills development, how are you going to develop 3.3, work-life balance 3.3, work satisfaction 3.2, company culture 3.1, basically a 3 out of 5. That's heinous. My opportunities to be promoted and receive appraisals 2.7. This is just objectively bad. Objectively bad. And when you kind of drill down and you see what people are saying about working there, it's problematic on so many levels. So here's the takeaway. this recent announcement that Stellantis is going to lay off another 400 white collar employees here in the United States. It would be one thing if that were kind of the last attempt that it's going to make. But you've already kind of heard me say that there's indications that this is just one step along a journey of a multi-pronged, multi-tiered set of layoffs that are going to happen. And the rationale it's giving is a shift in focus to electric vehicles, and then questions around whether electric vehicles right now, with what we're looking going on, the Biden administration has committed in its recent budget submission process to building out hundreds of thousands of electric vehicle fueling stations. Okay, but the future of electric vehicles in the United States is still not certain. So if they're banking on these layoffs for that reason, that's a poor decision. So I hope that you found this video to be helpful, enlightening, thought-provoking. The perspective of this playlist of me shining a spotlight on a regular basis of companies in the news in terms of what they're doing from an employee-centric standpoint is to get people in this community to start thinking about the future of work, the need to focus on employees, and organizations shifting their behaviors from a culture perspective to go from toxic organization to an amazing workplace. If you like the video, please like it, share it. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I need the support to grow out so that we can exert a little bit more influence. And if you know of anybody who's doing great work in an organization to build a great culture, introduce me to them, drop a comment, and what I'll do is I'll try to get them on the Chasing the Dream podcast as we get ready to launch the second season. So thank you so much for stopping in today, and make today a great day.